සුබ සන්ධ්‍යාවත් සියලු දෙනාටම අද මයි මාසේ 7 වෙනිදා අපි ආයෙමත් එකතු වෙනවා. We are meeting again as usual on Sundays to discuss kind of a national issue that needs resolutions. So that's what basically we are doing. We've been doing the discussions for a while, and now slowly we are picking up some fundamental principles and values, and that's what we are following. So say, for example, today's talk about SOEs involves all three of these: reducing wastage, increasing productivity, research and innovation. And we also picked up some values that we might have to take up as our own as well, because they are really important ones: meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. So let's keep going, and hopefully we will be able to make a good impact by educating the public before next presidential or a general election. So today we have two speakers to start with. And first is going to be Sri Lanka prosperity through transformation of enterprises. This will be made by Gratian A Peiris, and I previously sent full detail about his capabilities and competencies. And this will be followed by a short presentation by Sanjeeva Jayavira, and he'll be still talking about SOEs and more examples and practical aspects. And then we will enter an open discussion. So this is how today's work is going to flow. And Gratian, of course, I have sent an introduction already, but I just read it out. He's a free space thinker. I know it personally very well. When he writes something, it takes about 5 years for me to understand what he's written. So lectured on industrial economics and management, University of Moratuwa. And he held top positions in private sector, public sector, and community-based enterprises in many countries. So he understands this in many aspects as well. And he was a chairman of Sri Lanka State Engineering Corporation in 2004 and 2005. And he's been a group CEO and a director of Eco Power Holdings Group as well. And he's a consultant to National Chambers of Commerce. And he's also been team leader for many other development assignments issued by many of the World Banks and also renowned organizations. So welcome, Gratian, and I will let you upload your slides and then start your presentation.
Good evening, gentlemen. I think it's all male audience today. Sri Lanka is bankrupt. The verdict is there. How do we save our motherland? That's the question. So when we look at that, prosperity through transformation of enterprises. Here, I'm talking about all the different types of enterprises, not only the SOEs. So everything under the sun that is in Sri Lanka needs to be transformed. Well, I have included this just for the record. And introduction, state of the economy, briefly. Enterprises in the economy, state-owned enterprises, purpose, performance, and prospects. Failure of the SOEs. I've been touching on these things. Need for a strong SOE framework. Government, the ultimate SOE. Transformation of SOEs in a market economy. Sri Lanka's path to bankruptcy. A hypothesis and the way forward. I think Mahendra Jayasekara's recent 35-minute presentation was shared. The summary is that he wants to define the SOEs much broader than the normal 500, going beyond that. Anything that is an intervention on the society, economy, or any other thing that affects the people considered as a SOE, and that's a fair thing. Then there is resistance and backlash for the transformation of the SOE specifically. That is from the politicians who don't want to give up their perks of appointing kith and kin and also looting these enterprises. Corporates, the large corporates, the private corporates also don't want that to happen because they have business models around these SOEs, how to siphon public funds. Beneficiaries from SOEs that are about, in Mahendra's estimation, 1 to 1.5 million. That is the employees and various other stakeholders. He tries to define the stakeholders of the SOEs. That was his role in that presentation. So what he has defined, I will have in another slide. Why the SOEs are transformed? Well, who are these boards? Are they capable? Can they run even a corner shop? These are all legitimate questions. Over ₹1 trillion are to be lost this year through the SOEs. That's a large sum of money. We have always stayed on the wrong side of the development agenda, and generations have lost progress. That's very correct. He was raising the issue, asking the audience, there are more than 8,000 accountants. I know there are more than 10,000 engineers, but is there engineering in this country? Is there accountancy and accountability in this country? There are lawyers. Is there law and order? Judiciary has failed miserably. He was quoting the headlines. So what is the purpose of life? Well, I mean, we can live and let others live, but we can champion certain causes. So the stakeholders that he has given are the politicians and their families, unions and the leadership, employees, religious institutions. They interfere, thinking that the public assets, people's assets, are embodied or are in these organizations, as these organizations are the custodians. And the general public also, they are in millions, and they have, and the chambers of commerce, industry associations as well. Now, my proposition is, I agree with Mahendra, and in fact, I mean, I was thinking in these same lines. SOEs are a very important factor in making the country bankrupt. No two words about it. Fully agree. There are other equally or more prominent factors as well. What are they? Lack of ethical, visionary, and competent national leadership. Same thing about the corporate sector. Same thing about the judiciary, clergy, and the professionals. Apathy and ignorance of the general public. Lack of civic, political, economic, and financial literacy of the general public. The above leading to the incompetent rogue governments coming into power without any governance or accountability, sorry about the typo, leading to an incompetent rogue government. So there is a rogue government, and they are becoming increasingly sort of, I mean, worse, resulting in bribery, corruption, waste, luxury, lethargy, and lack of patriotism. That has led to the current bankruptcy in Sri Lanka. There are necessary and sufficient conditions if you were to turn around anything. So some conditions are absolutely necessary, but having those necessary conditions alone will not achieve the result. There are other conditions that are necessary as well. That's why we call it necessary and sufficient. Above 2 and 3, that is lack of ethical, visionary, patriotic leadership in the corporate sector. Then the lack of ethical, visionary, patriotic leadership in among the judiciary, clergy, and the professionals. If we can correct those two, start there, then we can get the people educated. That is the number 4. We can overcome the apathy, and then we can have ethical, visionary, competent national leadership. So this would be the necessary and sufficient conditions in my hypothesis. So if you look at the stakeholders, politicians, and their families, I have put in red what is bad interest, right? Cronies and deal makers, unions and union leaderships, employees, religious institutions, general public. So what do the general public expect from the SOEs? They expect law and order, national security, they, as consumers and users of services, they want the service. Employees, and they want to become employees. It has to be an equal chance. Then SMEs, they are an important stakeholder in the economy. Development partners, they have a legitimate interest in these SOEs. Most of these projects and programs are launched through them. Transparency, accountability, they expect. Foreign investors, when they come, they interact with these SOEs, right? Tourists, again, I mean, when they come to the country, law and order, safety, security, hygiene, all these things are important for them as well. Resident foreigners, there is a lot of them. They also want the same thing. Vulnerable groups, they want protection and they want to improve their situation. Minorities, they want the equality and equity. So all these are to be handled by the SOEs. Then foreign governments, they want us to be non-aligned or on their side. Poor, they need the poor group. Women, children, posterity, borrow the environment from them and leave it as. And the professionals also, they have a stakeholder interest in the SOEs. They want, if they are working as professionals in these organizations, they want the professional independence, career progress, and opportunity to do the research and development. So this Charlie Rees is a very a well-known person. His last article, when he retired in 2001, it was 545 versus 300,000 people. 300 million. This is the US case. Tax, it's about the tax and various other things, right? I cannot see because of the, yeah. Taxes, tobacco, taxes, drink, taxing if he tries to think. Taxes, cigars, taxes, beers, if he cries, taxes, tears. So this is a very famous poem. 225 එපා 225ට ඉදිරිව මිලියන 225.5ක ජනතාව අරගලය. That was the same scenario here. And Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Like that, dishonesty anywhere is a threat to honesty everywhere. So we need a paradigm change. State of the economy, well, World Bank's country representative director says that the current crisis is not a temporary liquidity shock. It cannot be resolved by external financing support. Instead, it is a unique opportunity for us to employ deep and permanent structural reforms that may be difficult under normal circumstances. But this crisis has made it much more easier for us to go in the right direction. So opportunity to build a strong and resilient economy is there through this crisis. When you look at our economy, 2022 central bank report, 7.8 negative growth, and this comes on top of this year -3. Some say it will be -4, and 2024 they expect 1.4% growth. So when we look at this, 2022 77.1 billion. It is down from 94 billion in 2018 or 18, yes. So when we look at this figure, right at the top, it is in 2013, we had 77. But we had a lower population and the per capita was $3,740. In 2012, though we had 70.45 USD billion, our per capita was 3,449, right? So basically, we have gone back 10 years or 11 years. So we have lost all that time. Shadow economy in Sri Lanka, if you look at the shadow economy, last estimate in 2015, it was 35.5%. And the average across 158 countries is 27.7%. What is the shadow economy? It is the informal economy and the illegal economy. And Hello. Yep. So it is illegal and informal economy, right? So this has been growing. The drugs deals, informal sector, all these things have been growing. So is this true or false? 36 billion of Sri Lankan export money is held in offshore. Nobody is taking any real investigation on this. Central Bank governor came on the matter and he has just, walked away from the issue. These are serious matters. Now, if you look at the drug problem, in 2021, 110,000 were arrested. Most of them would be in the prisons. This is people, and this is only the arrests. And if you look at the real problem, let's say 1 in 10 is arrested, so that means 1 million people addicted into various things. It's a serious issue. And if you look at the drug hauls, 4.5 billion, 23.12 billion. Sri Lanka has become a hub for drug trafficking. So if you look at the labor force participation is 49%, males 74, females 31. Economically active 8.7 million. They will have to support all the others, entire 22.5 million. And again, males 5.6 and females 3.0 million. 66% of the workforce is doing informal work, according to ILO. 66%. So informal work means poor job quality, low productivity and incomes, poor working conditions, occupational health and safety standards none, limited access to knowledge, technology, finance and markets. So this is a grave scenario. Around 10% of the Sri Lankan population are working abroad. As per Ravinatha Ariyasinghe, in 2020, he was estimating that. Then he was estimating 1.5 million were workers. And last year and year before, last year it was 311,000 that left. During these 4 months, I think, it's about 100,000 that have gone out. So 1.9 million easily outside the country. So if you look at that 1.9 million sending about now, 7 billion was sent year after year for a few years by these people before the COVID. And if you look at that $7 billion and consider it as 50% of their earnings, because they need the spending money, living money over there. And that means, they are getting about 14 billion as wages in those countries. Assuming the wages to be 20% of the turnover of the organizations that they are working, some of them are housemates, I know, then, it could be 70 billion, let's say 50 billion. So this is the potential income generation through engaging these people in our country. But we don't want them. They are an excess. By creating jobs in Sri Lanka, we can, easily develop the country. We have to do that. When you calculate the GDP per capita of a country, the GDP is divided by the people in the country, citizens. Now, when we are calculating the GDP per capita for Korea or Singapore, the workforce is much greater than the workforce of the particular country. So the output is of the entire workforce, and the GDP calculated is by dividing only the people in the country, right? So they report a higher GDP. So now when we move on to the entrepreneurs in the economy, there are different names given to various specialties. Aeropreneur is somebody who is interested in aerospace business. Biopreneur, biology, biotech, bioengineering, and all that. And technopreneur, technopreneur is about technology. Webpreneur is about the web services. Sociopreneur is addressing a social issue at a profit. Politypreneur uses the politics as the business platform. Solopreneur is somebody who works alone. Dealpreneur is putting the deals and making a buck. Pastorpreneur is somebody who uses the church as a business, right? Then drugpreneur engages in drugs. Tenderpreneur fixes the tenders. So these are all entrepreneurs inside the economy. And we have a fair share of the ones that are inbred in Sri Lanka. I mean, when you look at the public listed companies, there are 294 of them listed on the stock exchange. The total market capitalization, that is the worth of all their shares at the current market prices, is 4 trillion rupees. That is $112 billion. When you compare the 12 billion, this is less than 2 years' money sent by the immigrant workers. So if they save 2 years' money, then they can buy all these companies. The Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, Chamber of Commerce, and other chambers are all controlled by the same parties. It is a conglomerate. It's in a club. Banks, casinos, and public limited companies are controlled by the same persons. I don't think, I mean, this sort of thing can happen in another country. Wheels within wheels. What is the annual report card for the 294 companies in terms of turnover, value addition, job creation, average wage, etc.? What is that? The corporate sector needs reform as well. It is a fact that these corporates benefit from corrupting SOEs and bureaucrats, as in the case of PB Jayasundara, it is very well recorded. That is the State Petroleum Corporation, Sri Lanka Petroleum Corporation bunkering business deal. Then SOEs, the purpose, performance, and prospects. SOE purpose is one is governance, like the Primary Commission, human rights, and various other. National security, army, navy, air force, and other forces, law and order, police, attorney general, court system, and the prisons. Regulatory, TRCSL, PUSL, Atomic Energy Authority. Foreign relations, foreign service, all this planning, National Planning Department, National Physical Planning Department, Treasury, water, Water Board, Irrigation Department, Agriculture, there are many organizations. Department of Export Agriculture is also there. R&D, Nerd Center, ITI, IDB, NBRO, Business Development, IDB, National Productivity Center, Construction, SCC, SDNCC, and all those things. Utilities, all those. And Sports, Cricket Board, Football Federation, right? These are somewhat state-controlled enterprises. So we know about the Cricket Board and its record and all these other things as well. So everything is in disarray. SOEs, the purpose of the SOEs, purpose of the large SOEs after independence, there was a very, very practical purpose, because the colonial masters left. They have taken whatever they could over the years. There was no capital build-up in the country, though we had a favorable balance and all that, right? It was regularly taken out as raw materials and everything. Then what happened was, we needed basic things like the cement, steel, tires, hardware, ceramics for us to develop. And the private sector was small. There were sterling companies in operation in Sri Lanka, and the private sector didn't have the technology and the capital. So performance-wise, they have performed well up to a certain point in time. And during that time, there was a good civil service and various other AR and FR, and still the colonial masters' discipline framework was working. Then taking bribes or teacher appointments, including sexual bribes and bank jobs, came in 1970 to 77 era, right? CW was one of the first to experience high level of corruption. There was a particular minister who brought in ships of dried fish and buried them at Valisara. Private practice was allowed for the doctors. Then what happened? The teachers started tuition. Police officers started consulting at and fixing the cases. Planning officers started doing the plans. The entire associate sector is in disarray. All right. Then prospects, SOEs can perform well under proper leadership and with no intervention from the politicians. Within 17 months, I have turned around State Engineering Corporation from 5.5 years losses into profits. PERC and SEMA, Public Enterprise Reform Commission and Strategic Enterprise Management Authority have failed miserably. They were to usher that era of responsibility. An approach such as Temasek Holdings in Singapore would be the answer. Each SOE, even the Attorney General's department, should have KPIs and a performance appraisal. COPE has become an ineffective post-mortem process. So is the annual audits by the Auditor General. So there should be other mechanisms. SOEs engaged in economic activities in competition with the private sector should compete directly. And for that, SOE should have the autonomy as well. So let's look at a few SOEs and how they were prioritized, JVs, and what happened to them. Shell Gas joint venture. That ended up as a failure. I'm not going to go into the details because that was structured very bad. Sri Lankan Emirates, President didn't like the Emirates because, I mean, he was not treated the way he wanted. Marketing department handed over to a relative of the minister. Oils and Fats Corporation handed over to Prima to enjoy a monopoly. Distilleries Corporation, Dharmishta principals came in and said, okay, we don't want to, earn money from the liquor, but we can, collect the excise duty. Inland fisheries, there was a thriving inland fishery setup, and then there was a canned fish importers. They found that, the rural people were not buying canned fish because they had the fish. They said, okay, these people are killing fish, and that is against our Dharmishta principles. Insurance Corporation privatized and taken back. Water's Edge privatized and taken back. Sugar assets sold, cannibalized, and sold. Tamankadu condensed milk, it was given to Nestle at a time that it was doing very well with the Parakum brand. And then they used it for years and gave it back as scrap steel. RPCs, branded products profit, but the workers cannot, get 1,000 rupees or whatever the pay rise. So strong SOE environment is needed. There is no question about it. Business concept has to be revisited, not only on the loss-making ones, but with everybody, right? KPIs, smart KPIs need to be there. Specific, measurable, achievable, resourced, and time-bound. Planning, best planning practices, competition, exports, management, auditing, going public at one point, one particular time, or sometimes, you will have to sort of, serve the purpose and get away, and work towards your own death. Staff competitive packages should be given to the staff. It has to be a very strong SOE environment. So it has some dignity. It had some dignity in the past, in 1960s and into 70s, and it has deteriorated very badly. Politics is not a game, but serious business, Winston Churchill. So politics is the art of making your selfish desire seems like the national interest. Is it what is happening in Sri Lanka? Government is the ultimate SOE. State is the people in a specific territory with definite boundaries, enjoying sovereignty over that territory and having their own government that are recognized by the other countries. So government is a state-owned business. Government is owned by the people. People appoint the government and they chuck the government out. State brings the government into power and discharges that. People have assigned the government the role of provision of national security, law and order, peace and harmony, utilities, jobs, welfare in a sustainable manner. That is the framework for development. Government is not even doing that. Thus, the government is the ultimate SOE and it has failed miserably. Once it is transformed, then every other SOE would be, right? So transforming the SOEs in a market economy, some considerations. Business purpose needs to be revisited. There has to be a strong business purpose for each SOE. And it has to be revisited, revalidated, and refined. SDG framework, Sustainable Development Goals framework, has to be there in that validation. support for the vulnerable people in the country. We have too many vulnerable people and more are becoming vulnerable. Co-poor dynamics within a triple P focus, that is the planet, people, and profit. Provide intermediate goods and services to the SMEs and micro enterprises. There are a lot of SMEs and micro enterprises that have the potential. So give them intermediate goods and services. Say, for instance, Rubber Products Development Center of the Department of Rubber Industries that was giving the people the what you call the intermediate product, the mix for molding. I'll get the technical term later. Designed to work for own liquidation after achieving the purpose, otherwise dispose. Now, say for instance, SMEC, Snowy Mountain Engineering Corporation was established by the Australian government to do the consultancy and construction of the Snowy Mountain the hydropower scheme. And once the project was done, government said, okay, we don't need this anymore. And it gave the workers, the staff, the SMEC ownership at the peppercorn price. So now the SMEC is within the first 100 consultants in the world. It has earned a little bad reputation by giving bribes in Sri Lanka as well. Co-petition. Co-petition is a word coined using cooperation and competition. This is a new term. So this is the cooperation among people who are competing. Let it be private sector and SOEs, or let it be private sector versus private sector. There has to be strong cooperation within a competition environment. They should be compete on certain criteria, but cooperate on all the other criteria. Value addition synergy to be focused. Then critical voids and linkages. Certain things are critical to the society. Say, for instance, a breakwater is needed for us to, create a harbor. The breakwater is public investment. Then how the breakwater would be funded and how the returns would accrue to the government, that is a structure that the government will have to work out when we construct the jetties. Politics, in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. This is Franklin D. Roosevelt. What is happening in Sri Lanka? By design, not by default. Lack of national development, this is my hypothesis. National development priorities, national development plans, prioritized project profiles, project life cycle management was not there, track research was not there. We are like a deflated soccer ball. If the proper processes are not followed, then we will end up like a defective soccer ball, like the Hambantota Harbour, Matala Airport, Surya Stadium, Conference Hall, the list goes on. Nelum Kuluna, right? So I see some bungee jumping from the Nelum Kuluna. I think, some people should be taken there. Without a rope, they should be asked to jump. So what has happened? The democracy has downgraded to kakistocracy. That is the rule by the worst in the community. And then it is to the plutocracy. So the government is set up by the rich in the country. And now it has degraded to kleptocracy. The people come into power to rob. So over the 75 years, we have lost the democracy through this process. Kakistocracy, plutocracy, and kleptocracy. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. Aren't we doing that? So we need a change. So how can we do this? The Sustainable Development Agenda is set. There are 2030 goals agreed by the Sri Lankan government. We should have, now have a sort of areas to cover. Then sustainability is defined as the management of the resources, allowing full recovery over a period of time. Natural capital is the term used for all natural resources. that can produce a sustainable natural income of goods and services. So natural income is natural capital is a very important concept in development. Natural income is the yield from those natural resources. Natural capital is important because it provides a cultural service, it interaction with the nature, the forest, the rivers, that brings the creativity, relaxation, provisioning services, forage, honey, fresh water, hunted animals, regulatory services, pollination, purification of water through the seepage and evaporation, supporting services like the water cycle and the nutrient cycle. So this sustainability is a very important thing in the development. Then I propose a P6 partnership: philosophical leadership, people sector, private sector, political parties, public sector, professional organizations to develop Sri Lanka. We find problems in all these. So philosophical sector is, those who think at the high level, meta level, about the attitudes and the concepts and philosophy. Then the professional sector, all the organizations, the OPA and the constituent bodies, some of them, if you ask them, do they have a code of ethics? They might not be able to throw something at you. People sector, individuals, people-based organizations, CBOs, NGOs, self-help groups, service clubs like the Lions, Rotary, Apex, JCs, Rotaract, YMCA, YMBA, YMMA, YWCA, all these things. Public sector. Then private sector, chambers, sector, industry associations and enterprises, political parties. So unless there is a strong P6 coalition, we cannot come out of this crisis. So political parties needs to be cleaned up. Their constitutions will have to be aligned with the constitution of the country. They cannot go in a way that is detrimental or that is against the country's name. Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Either we'll have to change the name, say it is not democratic, something else. It is not socialist, something else, neoliberal. It is not republic, it has to be something else. So either we respect the constitution and have the philosophical drivers of the constitution embodied in these political parties and the running of the government. So this is, framework of, all these different things. I have put in the blue various pillars or various, apex scenarios. National security, of course, I have put in red. That cannot be compromised. But for that, we don't need this much of army because it's more of a policy thing than anything else. And the latest reports are that the Army, Navy, Air Force, they are more corrupt than any of the other SOEs. Then we will have a football, that is soccer ball, that is nice. It has 12 pentagons and 20 hexagons, all in 32 facets. And all that will have to be, the inside would be the governance, the air that inflates the ball. Only a few facets shown, properly planned and developed, and all facets must be matched. The pentagons and the hexagons, they match very well. Otherwise, the ball will be out of shape. Rogues don't build a nation. People have to throw the rogues out. How many people needed to resurrect the country? President, 1, and the staff, 200 maybe. Cabinet ministers, 20, no more than that. And staff, 100. Deputy ministers, 20. So altogether, Parliament, 225. Staff, 1,000. So altogether, I estimate about 2,500 people that is needed. Key persons and 16,000 others. Let's say 20,000. Right? So we can find, 100,000 good people in this country. Right? Aragalaya asked for a Paddhati events, a system change. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's what the government, that was asked. So establish the rule of law. No one should be above the law. Re-establish the value system. Right now, myself, I come first. My family comes next. Then might be my employer. Then the country. This is the lopsided value structure. It has to, change the proper way. Country first, employer. If the employer is doing something damaging to the country, the person has a responsibility to become a whistleblower. That's very important. Family comes above me, and I have to be having that vision in my life. Zero tolerance to cronyism, drugs, nepotism, fraud, corruption, and bribery, waste and luxury life at the expense of the people, lethargy, professional negligence, crimes, and white elephant projects. There should be zero tolerance. Equal opportunity through MPH, meritocracy, performance, and honesty, pro-poor sustainable economic growth using 17 SDGs and PPP enterprises. Governance dashboard, there has to be certain indicators. Dashboard should be there for the governance. So like the GDP, per capita income, Gini coefficient, all those things, the labor force participation, we're getting more people into the labor force. 8 million people cannot support the 22.5 million people. We establish people's enterprises, mutual companies, cooperatives, SP, special purpose enterprises with people as owners of the capital. In a capitalist system, people cannot get out of poverty by becoming wage earners. They will have to own capital. There has to be a mechanism for the people to start owning capital, getting passive income, augment their income, and then end the slavery that is imposed on them. Politics, there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, no politic, no popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. Martin Luther King. So, show a man that gets rich by being a politician, I'll show you a cook. If voting made any difference, they would not let us vote. Do learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize Voltaire. So, well, sometimes you'll have to, think about very, very different ways. I was looking at whether, out of my own curiosity, whether you can extinguish a fire by throwing a bomb. Yes, you can. There are patents as well. By changing nothing, nothing changes. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chula.
Yeah, fantastic.
Very well.
It was fantastic outline, as you normally do. I know you will do something like this, and it will take about 3 months for me to understand exactly what you said. But it is a really eye-opener. I'll be coming back to this, but Sanjeeva wanted to do a short presentation about certain states, and then we will come to a discussion. I think it will be fantastic today. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Right. So good evening to everyone, and Gratian, thanks for your comprehensive presentation. I don't think that I have major differences in most of what you have presented and recommended. But as you know, my point was this document is basically being presented in support of my previous presentation made, I think, 2 weeks ago, that the SOEs should be privatized, in my opinion. In order to emphasize my point, actually, I drew out a copy of the Auditor General's audit report on the State Engineering Corporation. Now, I selected this basically because Chula had mentioned that Gratian had been the chairman, but I acknowledge that that was over 15 years ago, and this is in no way to reflect anything on Gratian. But basically, I thought he might be able to shed some light on some of the issues that are highlighted here. But I think all of you all know and appreciate what an audit report is. Now, in terms of the SOEs, the audit is usually done, or not usually, it's always done by the Auditor General of Sri Lanka. And this is the report that he has submitted for the year ending 2017, although it is on record that the State Engineering Corporation financial statements have not been submitted to the Parliament for the since 2015. And even this report, the auditors have basically said that despite their comments here, the entirety of the accounts had not been submitted at the time of the audit by the management of State Engineering Corporation. The fact that, this, I mean, I need to emphasize this now, as a listed company, of which I was the CFO for several, we were compelled to submit our audited financial statements along with the annual report to our shareholders within 3 months of the financial year end. So most of our financial year ends was on 31st of March. And by 30th of June, accounts had to be finalized, submitted to the audit, and the auditors had to give their opinion. And we then basically published our annual report and sent it to the shareholders. And then after giving 21 days of notice, working days of notice, the annual general meeting of the shareholders was held. So that was all done within 90 days. So you can see the contrast between the discipline that is imposed on the private sector companies versus what we have in the state-owned enterprises. So, yeah, so this is the first point, that they say that the annual statements had not been properly furnished to them, even in spite of them doing the audit about 1 year subsequent to that. Yeah. Now, some of the things to some of you might be a little bit not very clear, but as an accountant, I think I can try and see whether I can explain as to why I have emphasized. Now, one of the things they have highlighted is that an age analysis for taxes payable as at 31st December amounting to 886 million has not been submitted to audit. Now, the importance of this is when you give an age analysis only, you would know for how many months of arrears in taxes the enterprise is. So, because every time you are in arrears, you need to compute penalty. So the fact of the matter is that the auditors have stated that there was no supporting analysis in support of the 886 million, means that the auditors were unable to verify as to whether the company has provided the penalties accordingly. Yeah. Yes, Tula, please go forward. Yeah. Now, this is another thing. Now, what they say is advances of 410 million or 411 million given for various purposes had not been settled up to the year end under review. Out of that, 145 million has remained unsettled for over 5 years. Now, generally, advances are given on the basis that it will be settled within 30 days. That's their general activity. That is emphasized later on in the audit report. But as this is a construction company, there is a possibility that some of those advances can go into maybe a bit longer than 30 days. But generally, that's the case. So it shows, this is inefficiency, which could be tied up with corruption. Similarly, they also say that people to whom monies are owed by the State Engineering Corporation amounting to 226 million had not been settled up to 3 to 5 years, and another for 116 million had not been settled for over 5 years. I mean, it's a reflection on the fact that who has done work on behalf of State Engineering Corporation, basically whom we refer to as creditors, have not been given their money. So as to how those creditors are expected to survive, I'm not too sure. So this is where, these issues of overpricing, commissions come into play, right? Otherwise, I just can't imagine a company having even a service is not getting paid for over 3 to 5 years. Yes, Jula. There are further things. Action has not been taken to recover 160 odd million rupees given to subcontractors. I mean, generally, this is important financial discipline. Then they have highlighted the fact that a surcharge, now this is a penalty, a penalty of 153 million and another 20 million has to be paid to the Provident Fund as well as the Employees Trust Fund, because the State Engineering Corporation had not remitted 317 million and 42 million respectively to these funds for allowances paid to employees since 2006 to 2015. Now, this is again, a serious deficiency. If you don't remit or pay what is due, these are statutory obligations, what you pay into the Provident Fund and the Trust Fund are statutory obligations. Now, this corporation has not done this for over 10 years in respect of certain wages, which has resulted not only in them standing outstanding, but also that it has attracted a penalty of 154 million, right? Yeah. And okay, go to the next one. Then it says, although mobilization advances of 198 million have been received since 2010, no work has been commenced. Now, this is a mobilization advances would have been received by the State Engineering Corporation from various other customers to commence work. But however, I mean, this is in 2017, the work has still not commenced. Then similarly, they have paid mobilization advances to subcontractors for various works amounting to nearly 3 billion rupees that has not been recovered over 5 years. So I mean, the taxpayers' money, which is what the State Engineering Corporation is dealing with, has been paid to various parties for amounting to 3 billion rupees and not been recovered, at least in terms of work done in lieu of what they have been paid for. Yeah, okay. Then this is another highlight that says a total loss of 308 million has been sustained by the State Engineering Corporation during the year under review due to inefficiencies in execution of projects. And a cumulative loss on those projects amounts to nearly 1.4 billion. So during the year 308 million, but if you take it as a cumulative on those projects, they have lost 1.4 billion rupees. Yes, Julia. There, I mean, again, re-emphasizing what they have lost. I mean, it says that 23 projects on which they made a profit of 44 million. However, they had 3 projects on which the loss amounted to 319 million. So basically, it's the reconciliation is a total of 275 million for some of the ongoing projects. Yeah, yeah, Julia. So VAT and NBT amounting to 123 million and 7 has not been remitted. Now, I think usually media always highlights that the private sector has not been paying taxes on time, but I mean, this is highlight that not only they, even the state corporations are not paying money that is due to the state on time. 235 million, which is due to NHDA, National Housing Development, has not been paid from 2002 for the period from 2002 to 2011. So it's still outstanding, I don't know, after 15 years. Yeah, Chula. So, and this is where, you know, with the problem with SOEs now, I mean, what they say is the actual cadre for this particular division, approved cadre is 344, but they have 785. So somebody has used their influence to increase the cadre. And what is stated is that that increase has not been approved. So, you know, basically, I do not know whether these people are in excess or whatever it is, but they have not followed the procedure. When a cadre has been approved, you cannot go above that cadre without getting approval from the top. Yeah. So here it says 8 projects to the value of 232 million that should have commenced in 2015 or before had not yet commenced, even at the date of the audit, which was on the 11th of October. So, I mean, basically, you know, if you don't do the work you are supposed to be doing at the correct time, then it's very difficult to go and compete for work elsewhere, because State Engineering Corporation has the luxury of being the first choice for government projects. This type of inefficiency goes, but I mean, in the private sector, you know, if you don't bid and get your projects and bring the cash flow, I mean, the company will go under. As in the case of state-owned enterprises, the taxpayer keeps on helping out with these inefficiencies. Yeah. Yes, Jula. So, I mean, this is again a surcharge of 114 million, just like earlier, because of the fact that the State Engineering Corporation has not remitted taxes on time in respect of VAT and economic service charge amounting to 628 million and 67 million. A penalty of 114 million has been enforced. Now, again, I mean, this is being highlighted to show how it costs the taxpayer due to the inefficiency of people who work in these operations. Yeah, Chula. I think that basically sums it up. Yeah, so what I want to highlight is, I mean, for my research, I have gone through the Auditor General reports in respect of so many other SOEs, the bigger ones, and some of them are even worse than this. So you can just imagine what, I mean, hopefully you will appreciate the problem we have on the basis of what I have highlighted. The issue here, what I'm trying to get at, maybe that's where I sort of don't completely agree with Gratian, is that the cancer has metastasis to the entire body, and there is no longer a way to try and cure this issue by saying that you can get rid of the politicians or take away their authority or basically take out their favorites from the top positions. Unfortunately, because of the fact that these enterprises has been operated for so long, maybe 3-4 decades, in a very, very inefficient manner, the inefficiencies have now basically filtered down right to the core of it, whereby it's very difficult. I mean, I was involved in a company which was under state management for a long time, which we took over in 1993. That is Ceylon Cold Stores, the owners of Elephant House brand. And when I moved in to that company in 2005, even then we were finding it difficult to really change some of the things that had got ingrained with the workforce and others over about a few years of management under the state. So it's not that easy. And now, if we think that if we can continue to, if the government continues to own these enterprises and try to transform them, my message is that no, we will fail, because it's too large a problem at the moment. Actually, I think in the last presentation that Dr. Siambalpitia made to us, he made a comment which actually at that time I wanted to pick up and drive home the point. He said that he deals with the Bangladesh government, and they are the secretary to the Ministry of Power. If he is asked to make a presentation on the Bangladesh energy sector off the cuff, the guy is capable of speaking for more than 1 hour without a prepared speech, because his knowledge was immense. He said, in his experience, we don't have public servants of that caliber in Sri Lanka. I totally agree. I totally agree. My dealing with these people is that we have lost it. The inefficiency, the incompetence, and all that is so huge that it's very difficult to try and continue to transform these SOEs under government rule. Just one more thing. Yeah. I think there is this thing.
You want me to share the
document? The other one. Yeah, okay, put it on screen as well. Yeah, so this is another highlight. I mean, this is the issues. I mean, this is how, today public transport in Sri Lanka is in a pitiable situation. But I mean, this is something going back to 2020, but this was recently highlighted as well as to how so many engines that we have purchased from India still remains idle, because what we have purchased is totally inappropriate. Now, again, I'm highlighting this because, as they say, these engines were purchased after, engineers of the railway going to India and choosing them. They had been sent to India, they have been trained, and despite all that, now they say that these are not workable in Sri Lanka, that they are inappropriate, that, the paragraphs that I have highlighted indicates, very serious technical deficiencies in the selection. So generally, in most companies, we have a technical team who evaluates whether what we purchase is in line with our specs and are fit for purpose. But, due to various things, like incompetence, corruption, and all that, these have been overlooked. And now the taxpayers are burdened with having idle engines, whilst the railway service is not at its most efficient or at all efficient. And these are mistakes that have been made. So I just wanted to illustrate this as well as one of the consequences of, or the issues that I have been stressing, that the corruption has gone right into the core of our decision making, and this thing, and it is not restricted to incompetent chairmen or managing directors. It's gone right down to middle management as well. So I think Gratian, thanks, Chula. That's okay with regards to this particular slide. I think Chula, I think Gratian mentioned something about Temasek and them. Now, I think obviously that can be held as a model to be followed in other countries. But Singapore is so different in terms of its people, its competency, its diligence, discipline, adherence to the rule of law, and all that. To expect a country which is, totally on the opposite side to embrace those qualities within the next decade or two is, I feel, going to be pretty tough. That I don't really believe that is possible. So that is why I keep on emphasizing in my articles or presentations that for me, the way out of this situation is that practically nearly all these SOEs, maybe CB and CEBI, we might make an exception, needs to be privatized or at least minimally restructured. Okay, Chula, that was what I wanted to. I mean, the whole purpose of it was to drive home what I have been saying in the last meeting, as well as through my articles. Thanks.
I think it's very good that you presented that, because it also summarizes the big word that Gratian mentioned, accountability. There appear to be no accountability anywhere in the structure about who made the decisions and how this happened and all that. So it's fantastic. Thanks, Sanjeev, for bringing that issue to us as well. So I'm sure there'll be people wanting to contribute and make suggestions and so on. I suggest we actually develop a blueprint, as I say, about this subject. I'll come back to you all later on about that, because Gratian's got a lot of good content, and you also said similar things, so we can put it all together. Yeah. Okay. Time for questions and discussions, comments, and so
on. Can I say a few things about the corporations? Say, for instance, if you look at, I turn around the corporation in 17 months. That is given in 2004 and 2005 annual reports. 2005 annual report was done, I think, soon afterwards. So that was done with the depleted staff. 540 odd people have been sent home by a VRS package. Some of the very competent people. And there were certain high-level positions were vacant. Like there was no personnel manager. There was no finance manager. And when I took over, the cash inflow was, I think, 30 million rupees for a month. That was April 2004. And that was not even sufficient to pay the salaries. Most of the projects were financially completed. They have taken the money, but physical completion was not there. That means every project that was to be completed was going to incur a loss. So within that background only I took over. Huge challenge. People asked whether the SEC was there. Before me, it was one of the respected guys in the private sector who was the chairman. I'm not going to give the names, right? And after me, it was a guy who came from Los Angeles with the friendship of Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who became the chairman. Then later on, he became the chairman of the BOI. So you don't, recruit people to organizations haphazardly. So after after that gentleman who chaired the BOI, there was a minister that was, then the minister became Vimal Veeravansa. He got a draftsperson to chair the State Engineering Corporation. If you really look at the Engineering Corporation history and compare that with John Keel's, how many chairpersons do you have in John Keel's from the inception to now? And how many chairmen the State Engineering Corporation did have? So this sort of, interference by the politics, getting a cadre of some, let's say, 300 or 200 and overstaffing that to 700 plus. And then giving work because, they need something to be done. They have not, the organizations have been run down, completely run down. So there is no two words about it. There are no systems, there are no protocols, there is no discipline. So when I resigned in November 2005, I was asked by the minister to consider coming back under President Mahinda Rajapaksa, and I said no, categorically no. Why I said no? I told the minister, I brought in some discipline over the last 17 months, and within 2 weeks, that has been ruined. That has been ruined. So there were times that the Engineering Corporation accounts were frozen by the taxation office. I had to go personally to the taxation office and plead with them, negotiate with them, and get the accounts operable. Then there was John Sanivaratna, the Minister of Justice. We were doing the Gataway Court Complex, and the minister was saying, no, we are not going to give money to the Engineering Corporation. We will be paying the subcontractors direct. I told the minister, Engineering Corporation is not yet another contractor. You cannot do that, minister. Give me the money, and I will be personally accountable for that money and showing you the progress. Minister Lakshman Kadiragama wanted a certain work done in Kandy, and that was getting delayed. Mrs. Kadiragama was calling. Then I said, okay, let me have a little time and I will get that done for the opening on the birthday of the minister, which I got the work done, but the minister died, assassinated before the birthday. So it is about the leadership and the political interference. So transformation of now, how do you account for the Sudulunu Vanchav? How do you account for the Poltel Vanchav? Who is doing that? This is a hand-in-glove operation. So you lower the standards, then allow the others to siphon the money out. This is what is going on. Yes, it is taxpayer money. Then you have the money coming into the particular ministry to pay to all the contractors. Then the private contractors getting their monies paid and the government institutions are not paid. So there is a lot that is in this entire thing. And there is an ongoing internal auditor planted by the Auditor General's Department at most of these places, 24/7. Those guys sometimes don't know what is going and what is coming. So everything that is in the Auditor General's Department shows that it is collapsed, right? But is privatization an answer. Can the private sector generate the jobs that we need? Out of the 4 million people employed by the public sector and the private sector, 1.5 million employed by the government sector. So if the private sector was more efficient, they should have created more jobs, more quality jobs in the country. Then now people wouldn't have to go abroad. What prevents the private sector doing that? Is it lack of resources, lack of opportunities? What is it? So this is the discussion that we should be having. Thank you very much.
Actually, if I can just respond with regards to the last comment that Gratian made. Gratian, ultimately, jobs are created in the private sector if it is for a meaningful purpose. No, the job of the private sector is create jobs as in done in this. So it's for the sake of just giving employment. So the fact of the matter is that basically our economy has not progressed as much as it should have. I mean, obviously we have to recognize the fact that the country was having a civil war for 25 years. Thereafter, we had other issues, the tsunamis, the Easter bombs, and various things. So it is not. I think those things need to be considered. But technically, the private sector works with one hand tied behind, because ultimately it's government policy. Do you know how difficult it is to get a approval to build a supermarket store in Sri Lanka? The amount of bribing that has to be given, the time it takes, those are real difficulties that the private sector encounters on a day-to-day basis. You try to clear anything from the Colombo port. Do you think you can get anything out without bribing, without harming somebody? Absolutely no. So, you need to accept the fact that the private sector, to a large extent in this country, is working with one hand tied behind. I'm not at all saying that the private sector is absolutely clean. They are certainly responsible for some of the corruption that goes on. But ultimately, the corruption is self-perpetuating, because if you can't get your supermarket opened on time, what do you do ultimately? You go and pay. So, I mean, that's just to clarify the problems that the private sector has. But if the economy grows, definitely private people invest. Ultimately, since 1985, other than for the fact that the CPC and CEB has been providing fuel and electricity, the entire economy has been run by the private sector. No? Private sector, along with the individuals who are in the business of doing various other businesses on their own, not by the government. I mean, do we have a single government institute who can compete on an export order? Can we do it? Absolutely no. So, just to Okay, thanks.
Sanjeeva, there's 3 people who's raised their hands. Ranjan, yes, first, Ranjan.
Thank you, Chula. Gratian, I congratulate you for that analysis in support of the public sector. Unfortunately, I cannot agree with you. I'm sorry about that. For about 50 years, this public sector was given for about 50 years or maybe more in Sri Lanka to prove itself. Several attempts were made to turn them around. During these 50-odd years. And the public sector has failed miserably, let down the country. Whatever you may say, to let down the country. And we are in a bankrupt state. Is there any other country in that received independence around about the same time as we did that has declared that they are bankrupt? I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think so. We are the only country. So enough is enough. Right. That's part one. Part two, the countries that started off to prove that the public sector is better at delivering the goods to the people than the private sector, that are the socialist countries, Russia and China, led by Russia and China, have also failed miserably. I remember in the last days of Russia's communism, socialism, give it whatever name you want, you see, it was capitalist Canada and capitalist America that had to send food to Russia. You see, the Russians were starving. So capitalism had to ultimately feed socialism. That's Russia. Look at China. What did Deng Xiaoping say? A cat is good even if it is made of clay so long as it catches mice. And he turned communism, read public sector, on its head. That is the start of the rise of China and becoming a superpower today. That is the start. China started with Deng Xiaoping, who had the boldness and courage and leadership to say, a cat is good even if it is made of clay, so long as it catches mice, and turn communism on its head. Right. So when I say communism, you can think public sector, and that is the start of the rise of China. So and I'm also reminded of, I come from a military background, so I am reminded of what two great generals said. This is about leadership. See, the general that took credit for winning the war in the West was General Eisenhower. You all know that. And the general who was given credit for having won the war in the East was MacArthur. Both having reached the pinnacle of their professions, both condemned war. Both, mind you, both condemned war as a tool of resolving disputes. They did not recommend that because war is such a horrendous solution, they said. Both did not. Now that is leadership. That is noble ethics, as I see it. Merely, unlike in Sri Lanka, some of our generals and field marshals are crowing about their greatness, about solving the war. You see, our war is actually not war. You see, it's an exaggeration. It's a hyperbolic statement. Actually, our war it doesn't fall into the category of real war. You see, ours was only a low intensity operation. For political benefit, they exaggerated and started using superlatives. Anyway, that's a different story. We can take it up later. So you see, Sri Lanka has to go back to the private sector, and it is going back. Now see what is happening. See, we had Caltex, Mobile Gas, and Shell doing such an excellent job there when we were in school. They did such in Sri Lanka, at that time when we were in school, in those senior forms, it was said that black oil is gold and you just cannot run an oil business at a loss. This is what in the senior form, this is what we were accustomed to hear. You just cannot run an oil business at a loss, and it is true. You cannot run it at a loss. Sri Lanka has the cleverness to show that we can run it at a loss. So we are great. So what more can I say about the undesirability of private enterprise. We are not learning. If we are not going to now today, let me conclude. You see, again we are going back to 2-3 companies: China petrol company, Sinopec, then Australian company and American company. You see, we have wasted our time, no? We have wasted our time, 50 years. You see, if we had carried on with those policies then, see how far we would have been ahead then. You see, we tried these politics. Politics in Sri Lanka has been ruinous. Democratic politics in Sri Lanka has been utterly ruinous. It has done more damage to Sri Lanka than good. Whether it is, yeah, I can develop on that point. See? So what we need are less egocentric leaders. You see, at all levels, political level, administrative level, bureaucratic level, we need to be like Eisenhower and MacArthur. I said, you see, merely because they were successful generals did not lead them, prompt them to promote war as a solution to human disputes. They condemned it. That is the kind of leadership Sri Lanka needs. Not egocentric leaders, or egocentric leaders and their supporters. I'll stop there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjan. We got only about 25-30 minutes. So there are 3 people raised hands. So I will take all those comments from the other 3 people also. And then maybe Gratian and Sanjeeva give answers. So we can conclude there. Yeah, Lakshman, next, yes.
Thank you, Chula. I will take a few minutes. First of all, thank you, Gratian, for a very comprehensive presentation. There are a lot of very important information. I think it's enough for a 3-hour presentation. A lot of information. And also, Sanjeeva's presentation was more focused on the State Engineering Corporation, and that gives a classic example of how government institutions are being run over the last 50 years. I have a few questions. There is a institute or agency called COPE, C-O-P-E, right? So at the end of the auditing procedures, all the institutions are directed to these COPs to handle bigger problems. But what is the end result? Do they have any legal powers to take any action? What is the use of having these kind of agencies? To Sanjeev, please.
Yeah, Lakshman, no, they don't have any legal these things. They grandstand to the television and everything, and pull down some of these senior managers, and that's all. Then it's forgotten, and next day we go back. So COPE doesn't do any functioning actually the useful function other than to grandstand to the media.
So can't they be given legal powers?
No, I think they might have to change the law there, Lakshman. They don't have that. They don't have that. Only the bribery commission or somebody will have to take it on a legal platform.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lakshman. Then Parakrama, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Chula. I have been listening very, very patiently. Now, Gratian has given a total analysis of it, and nobody can argue about it. And also, I do wish Mr. Javira picked up the CEB rather than the CFR to give what I've been doing. They are lost as trillions, you see, without any kind of control and audits or anything like that. All that is of no value to us, just talking. You see, what I'm going to ask is, all that Gratian has said is well and good. We wish we could do that one. I know for sure it's not going to happen in my lifetime, at least. The primary requirement is for us to have leadership, which we will not get. Don't have any illusions about that. So the question I want to ask is, All what we can push for is accountability, even in some small sectors. Now, there are 11 people here. What are we going to do about it? Is there anything that we can make an impact? Otherwise, we can talk and talk and talk and talk. That's about all. But let's focus on something we can do. Now, Chula, sometime back, we talked about this business of the private sector hoarding money outside, right? Now it seemed to have gone dead. You know, Minister of Justice had a big kata in the parliament, said he's going to stop to it. That was 5 months ago in December 8 to be exact. Now, we must get that one done. Even if you don't get that money back, what is there, we must stop it even now, which he can do. All we have to do is remove that the law that was brought in 2017, which gave them legal permission to steal. You see, now, if we are to make any kind of impact, we must focus on some few things that we can do. Now, I would like to suggest 3 things. Most important thing is about that foreign exchange matter. If you do that one, we export enough even now for our needs, even if we may not be able to have a surplus to pay the loans, but we don't have to go on borrowing more and more and more like this present government is doing. That is the first thing. Next one is actually, although we talk about politicians, people and all that, our people bound down to the bottom are corrupt. Yeah, but that way I fully agree with the inverted pyramid that Gratian showed. You see, that shows the reality of. So it is not a thing that we can just go on claiming the government, but we have to make a change. But that change will come if we can make some small contribution towards that one. Each of us has the ability to do that within this corrupt system. We can say it's corrupt, we must be changed, paradigm change, and all that nonsense we can talk about. It's not going to happen overnight, not even in decades. But there is a change we can make. So one thing I said is, if this group is to make any kind of effect, we must go on pushing for that change to happen about the foreign exchange. That's very primary. It's a very significant change that can be. Now, also other thing is, knowing that one, although I also believe that, okay, the SOEs must be privatized. Now, I think it's a much more dangerous thing than to even to do that one, if that is the kind of private sector we have. So therefore, what comes in is accountability. How can we push for that accountability? We must pick at least a few occasions where we can even go to courts, right, to demand accountability. You see, now that is the kind of thing we should be focusing. But this group is to make an impact. We must choose a few things. Now, for instance, I don't know, Lakshman can answer me that the most disgusting behavior of the university teachers these days. Can you imagine what they are doing that? Is that the example they are setting up to all their students and everybody there? You see, keeping the poor students, blackmailing the students' rights. You see, now that is the kind of thing. As long as we have that kind of this thing, we will not expect to make any change. So what we must do is we must raise our voice on things like that one. Start changing the people. Each one must change. And the other thing is, these days there are hordes of people just going away abroad. You see, they don't realize they are over debt to the country. They have got everything, but they are as bad as the private sector who are using our resources and taking the money out. These people also used our resources for their education and all the purse and just going away. And they don't bring any money here. It's the poor women who go to Middle East who send us some money. So we must insist that that happens. All those people, we must say that if they have to go abroad, pay back what was spent on. We have to do few things like that. Otherwise, we are just wasting our time talking.
Thank you. Thank you, Parakrama.
I give just a 1 minute this thing to Parakrama. Parakrama, with regards to this private sector people having hoarded money overseas, I mean, I am not saying that it is not there. There must be some element of it, right? But not to, the thing is, somebody has to take the bull by the horn, because this was initially identified by some NGO in Washington. Now, if they have the true data backing up this, right? I think basically from what I gather, it's more of an estimate. Somebody has to have the guts to go and get that information, come here, into Sri Lanka and make a public announcement, because there are only very few big companies in Sri Lanka who export now, right? Name them, so that those companies either have to defend themselves publicly, or they will sue the person who said that and go to courts, and where it can be proved. So otherwise, this is a typical grandstanding in Sri Lanka, where insinuations are made with no proof.
Yeah, no, okay.
My personal feeling is that somebody has to take the bull by the horn and name a few of these fellows, and then we will see what is the truth.
Yeah, no, Sanjeev, no, that is where we have Minister of Justice who made this statement in the parliament, saying that he has talked about 53 million, and also the present governor of the central bank. He must know very well, because he was the deputy governor for a long time when this was happening. You see, I put a RTI asking for the last year how much we are supposed to export, how much money we have got. I never got a reply. You don't have to have somebody from Washington coming and putting a case like that. No, this has been picked up, and the governor did not deny it. You see, so there are officials here whose duty is to do that one. And the minister, what I'm saying is the Minister of Justice must at least stop it now. We know how the door was opened by removing the foreign exchange law. You see, we were not allowed to have an account abroad anywhere, even on money that we earned outside. Now, I earn some money from working abroad, but I'm not allowed to keep that money outside. I'm not supposed to bring that here. I happily do that because I earn that money because using the resources of this country. Now, that is why I say the private sector is utterly corrupt, because the present situation is, this SOEs in this present situation is a boon to the private sector, because they are using that. You see, now, Gratian talked about this. Sudulunu and this is like that is also private sector are involved in that. You see, now that change has to happen. That is where accountability comes in. But we can't change all that one. We must pick a few, right? That, like I said, I would like to take this case up and go on shouting about it till somebody gets done. Next one is I would like to voice our opinion about the behavior of our people, so-called professionals and the educated people. And the third one is we must insist these people who are going by the hundreds of thousands abroad, having learned and get the experience here in Sri Lanka at the cost of our poor people, must pay back, because they don't send money back. It's only the poor women who go to Middle East who send any money back. We must have some system to that. We must insist on that. Now, let's pick out a few things like that which we can make an impact. Otherwise, we are just talking. That's about all.
Thank you, Parakram. We are always trying to walk the talk, as you know. So thanks for suggesting all these things. We'll see how we can proceed. It's not we don't have an upper hand to go and do things. We just try to do as we are doing, and we'll get there, I think. I mean, I'm quite optimistic we'll be able to achieve some results. Kapila, next, yes, Kapila.
Yeah, first I would like to thank Gratian and also Sanjeev and Parakram, because I was just having a little bit of childhood memories, and I think I should thank Ranjan also for beginning. Ultimately, what I found that everyone is agreeing on one point, that is lack of leadership, visionary leadership. Now, I was looking at my childhood days when CTB was first, I think when the CTB was, the private sector bus service was nationalized. And at that time, I think we had a fantastic bus service. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we can take a bus and go. And the buses were there. And then I think during Mr. Chamli Gunawardhan, who was the chairman, that time CTB was making profits. But subsequently, politics moved in and CTB was utterly ruined. And then came the private sector. And now what has happened is after 7 o'clock, there are no buses. And I see people stranded and then going by three-wheelers. And poor people can't afford this. So, and private sector is also a law unto themselves. And if you look at the way, I think it is highway terrorism or road terrorism, the way they voted, the way they have absolutely no rules or regulations. I mean, we as motorists, if you are driving, forget about it, you have to give them way and, stop the car. Otherwise, they will run over you. And I have seen 2 days back, I was coming to Kandy, and at Kajugama, there was this huge accident, 2 buses. Collision, and nobody takes any action on any of these things because they have paid bribes to the police stations. So police is not taking any action, nobody is taking any actions, and some of the bus owners are connected to politicians. The second example I would like to point out is the CGR during
the famous engineer who was running that. And you see, if you look at the stations those days, beautiful.
Excuse me,
Station
that is the
transport.
engineer Rampala, VD Rampala.
That's right. So the stations look beautiful and goods were transported by those black little boxes. I don't know how they call it, carriage boxes or whatever it is. And there was some service and fuel was transported by the train, not these huge, massive, I don't know what these, how do you call them? The trucks. And you see, actually, Britishers so much better about our future than most of us. Because they, if you look at, they use the railway to transport oil to Peradeniya. There are 2 stations, and from there, small the trucks were sort of taking it to the stations. And now these huge ones are taking it, and train is totally idle, and train is also losing money. The third part I would like to show is that the trade unions. I think a trade union should not have any politics in it. What has happened is now there are trade unions formed by all political parties, which is to the decimation of the government institutions. Because when one party is in power, the other trade unions will undermine. So the trade union should only have one focus, that is to the welfare of their workers, as well as the welfare of the institution. Because if the institution fails, they fail. So I think there is something basically fundamentally wrong in the way we are looking at things. I have no argument with Gratian, no Ranjan, no any one of you. What I am saying is the way we look at things. I don't think we had visionary leadership in any way. I mean, if mass transportation was looked at the very beginning, things would have been much better. We probably didn't need all these highways. I don't know. I mean, I'm just expressing my opinion, and it's open to criticism. Thank you.
Thank you, Kapila. We'll come to a small discussion at the end because Nilmini is also raised. And Nilmini, yes.
Hi, thank you so much for both speakers for their really interesting presentations. Just to ask you a couple of questions, really. If the system is so corrupt, will change of ownership of state-owned enterprises is that really going to make much difference? And that's one question. And then secondly, is there some halfway house? Because rather than privatizing most of the state-owned enterprises, is it possible to bring in managers, chair people from the private sector to sort out the inefficiencies? And also, are there certain sectors which are actually better left in the hands of the public sector because they are public services? And by bringing them into the private sector, aren't you simply going to push up costs to the ultimate consumer? I'm just thinking in terms of, for example, the healthcare system. By bringing that into private hands, will that exclude people who are very vulnerable and who need access to healthcare because the cost suddenly goes up the moment you bring things into private ownership?
Thank you, Nilmini. Just answer your question because you talked about NHS, and the NHS tried private managerial involvement since 1990s, and that is why the NHS now failed, basically in the UK. And in relation to the COPE, we talked about that. Just to mention that you remember that Ranil Wickremesinghe did the prorogation of the parliament as soon as he came in. What does it mean is every issue that was up at the COPE is dissolved after that. So it's a new COPE, and then you start the work again, and nothing is taken forward from there. So again, perfect examples of lack of accountability. So here we are now. Gratian and Sanchiv, you can answer to all these comments that's been made, and then we can conclude, but we'll take it forward from there in a different way. Thanks.
Can I?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So, Gratian, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First, Ranjan, thank you very much. Ranjan, I never support any sort of, system that is not efficient. not only, I mean, the efficiency has to be there, but efficacy, which is more important. That is the sustainability. So just, I mean, I have been in the public sector, private sector, and also in the community sector. So I don't have a preferred sector as per se. What I'm for is delivering the goods and services to the people in the most efficient way. Certain things need to be monopolies, and certain other things can be structured around those monopolies. Say, for instance, you cannot have two railway lines going from Colombo to Kandy, two competitors, but it could be the same railway line. You can have two parties having the trains on there, but then the signals will have to be controlled by one, right? So there are many ways of creating competition, and the problem about the corruption, is it a chicken and egg situation? Where did the corruption start? Is it in the public sector or is it in the private sector? Who was the deal maker? Who was engaged in the brokers? Who was getting them to sort of, I mean, fix the deals? Who was fixing the deal with P.B. Jayasundar? Did P.B. Jayasundar approach the company or company approached P.B. Jayasundar? Why wasn't the company sued for that situation? So that is one aspect, because we have to understand that the problem is a mega problem. So small fixes will not, I mean, if you are pushed, I mean, you give a bribe. Well, then if you don't give a bribe, if all the private supermarket guys find a solution through the Chamber of Commerce, saying that, I mean, we cannot open the supermarket branches because, I mean, these guys are asking bribes. Or if you sort of, I mean, have go to the bribery commission, there is a bribery commission. Why can't you use that? So, well, the thing is this, I mean, the question is, where does the corruption originate? The source of corruption. This is very important. And then the COPE matter, Lakshman raised, I mean, has the COPE some powers? I don't know. I mean, basically, I cannot say yes or no without looking at the terms of reference for the COPE. What are their powers? They are a grandstanding show. That I agree with Sanjeeva. And you need people with substance, knowledge about the enterprises, knowledge about finances, managerial aspects, and various other things. Do the people in the COPE have any of these things, including the chairman, current? No. So how can you expect something out of the COPE? It is a failure. But in the public sector enterprises, whatever they are, there is a person. Now, if you look at the constitution of the public sector enterprises, SOEs, there is a mandated composition by the particular act. Say, for instance,
I think he lost the connection. So when he comes back,
So can I clarify a couple of things? I think we need to hope why the private sector and not the public sector, and if corruption is there. Normally there the issue is this, I mean, in the private sector, ultimately the efficiency, the maximum efficiency is achieved because the providers of the capital for that business has put in their own personal funds. Just like all of us around this amounts here, when it comes to our money, we'll make sure that it is run efficiently. So that's the reason the private sector is more efficient than the public sector, because in public sector, the money lost is nobody's. Nobody is held accountable, while in the private sector, it is held. So that's the reason. And so far, no one in Sri Lanka, as far as I'm aware, has proposed that the health service be privatized or anything. I mean, we have private healthcare if needed for people who can afford, but the government tries to do it, but the government attempt is very poor because of the fact that they don't have enough money, just like I suppose the NHS. But the private sector, I mean, has filled in a certain void, but that's for people who can afford. The other thing about the corruption, that I think Gratian mentioned a few points. I think none of us wants to pay anybody anything, I mean, amongst us. But then if you consider that even to admit our children to school, a good government school, we have to, that's where, I mean, they say that corruption starts. You teach your small kid to lie about where you live when they go for the interview. Otherwise, you harm the principal. So none of us go to the bribery commission and ask, and we don't stop admitting our children to school. That's preferred school. We are compelled to. Private sector is compelled to. True enough, I mean, none of us want to pay for opening our supermarkets. But if we don't, the whole thing will stop. Because ultimately, in spite of paying the bribe, you will still continue to make a return on that investment. So that's how that's why I'm saying corruption is self-perpetuating. It doesn't, this whole thing that the private sector is corrupt is utter nonsense in my opinion. Everybody in this country is corrupt, from the politicians to the public sector. Most of these, what I highlighted in that audit report and that National Railways, this thing is is corruption at not only at the politicians level, at the bureaucrats level. You're all corrupt. I mean, when you stop by a policeman in Sri Lanka for a traffic offense, what do you do? First of all, take your wallet out, and inclusive of the license, this thing. You go to the the municipality council to pay something or get something resolved. You have to pay the peon. So this, I think, people who jump on the bandwagon and say that the private sector is corrupt, I think is missing a point, because in this country, all of us are corrupt.
Gratian is back.
My question was, who is the originator of most of this corruption? So
yeah, Gratian, Gratian, but if somebody,
politicians, they originate some of this corruption, right? Say, for instance, if you want to have a power plant built, then of course you go to the minister and say, okay, I want this power plant and this is the commission. Well, then the minister says, okay, fine, then you have to look after the TEC and the CATB, and you have to look after this one. But I will look after everybody. You give me and I will look after. So he's a politipreneur as well as he's a deal quick. So he acts in both these things. Then I'm not going to go into the dynamics of all these things, right? This country in 1960s, this country was going somewhere, right? Then in 1970, which I have mentioned very clearly, the quotas for public sector employment was given to the MPs, teachers and bank managers, bank officers. The interviews done by the MPs for the teachers, female teachers, the interviews were done at the rest houses, right? That was in 1970. No wonder when these teachers became principals, the school system was gone. When these guys became bank managers, the banking system was gone, right? So we have a very, very sad and ugly history. We haven't come here all of a sudden. So the corruption, that's exactly what I said. Re-quoting Martin Luther King. Injustice somewhere creates injustice everywhere. Corruption somewhere creates corruption everywhere. So dishonesty somewhere affects honesty everywhere. So you cannot have a situation where corruption and dishonesty tolerated in a system. You cannot have a situation where corruption and dishonesty institutionalized, either in the private sector or public sector, right? So this is the overall scenario, and incompetence is rampant. So why? Because meritocracy is not there. So my presentation is more about a macro scenario rather than a micro scenario, because it is all interlined and interconnected. It has a sort of a, intricately it is connected, right? So we cannot take out and say, who is corrupt and who is not corrupt. They are all in the game together. Now, say, for instance, I know a particular land. I'm living at Jayal, not far away from here, the Vattala. There was a land that was belonging to the government. Well, or the municipality, and the two parties got together and sold the land to a private party. So now there is a supermarket there. It was earlier shipping agency that was on that land. Now it is a supermarket. So we can, quote the examples. So this has to stop somewhere. What is happening is pathetic. And what we see is not even the tip of the iceberg. So what Nilmini asked about the halfway house, clean up these organizations, give it on a TOR, terms of reference, right? So this is a TOR, and this is the organization, and then you have to deal with it. Would there be takers? I think, there will be takers. There will be people who are game enough to take a challenge and clean up some of these organizations, right? So that is very important, because the thing is, it's the way, if we privatize these organizations as they are. Now, last time, Dr. Siambalapitiya mentioned that instead of 4114 rupees per unit, electricity can be produced at 30 rupees. That is even with the tax. If you take the tax out, it will be less than that. Imagine the CEB is privatized as it is today, with the tariff supporting all that inefficiency, all that corruption, and breaking even or making a profit. Then the private sector will come in and they will just, buy the fuel and all that. There is a supernormal profit that will be available. Even if you wanted to privatize CEB, for argument's sake, you will have to still get rid of the corruption. You will have to, put a system in there. You will have to improve it. Then you do whatever that you want. And as a out of the box, no box, free space scenario, why can't you open up a special purpose vehicle for the migrants to contribute as a unit trust or investment fund to buy some of these assets? Could be the insurance corporation, could be the Sri Lanka Telecom, could be the Lanka hospitals. And well, what they need is basically 10% of their annual remittance to buy all three together, or maybe two of them together. If they are sending 7 billion, 10% is 700 billion, right? And 700 billion is sufficient for, more than sufficient for SLT shares and the Lanka hospital shares. So that those people will have some capital, and that capital will be bringing them dividends, and there is a market mechanism for that. So they will have to find out innovative ways to get these things done. So I'm not advocating SOEs or private sector, but I'm an advocate about socialism. Socialism is something that is very that is not very well understood by people. Socialism is there in Australia. Socialism is there in Denmark and all those countries. They have higher levels of socialism than we do have. In France, socialism is there, right? When we don't understand something, then we mistake that for something else. In France, depending on your income, everybody is to put an income tax return. Based on your last year's income tax return, your benefits for the next year will be determined. Whether your children will be paying school fees, whether you will be paying for certain health benefits, all that will be determined. So in Sri Lanka, we have enough human capital in this country. 140,000 people engaged in the IT sector. In over 500 plus companies, they are targeting a 5 billion turnover by 2025. Why can't it be 10 billion by 2030? What is needed? What prevents anybody doing that? So these are the questions, I think, the high level questions that we should be asking. The SOEs, they are corrupt, they have been destroyed, and they are a curse on the nation as they are right now. That I have to agree. The reforming wouldn't be privatizing. First, they'll have to sort of, first structured properly. They have to be valued. And there is 1.5 million people in the public sector overall, including the Army, Navy, Air Force. So what is the destiny of their families? So these issues are there. Then, we can look at what's to be done with these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gratian. And I think we are nearly 2 hours up now, so we'll conclude and continue at a later time. I must thank both Gratian and Sanjeeva for making such thought-provoking contributions, and also everybody else who made comments and various other criticisms, as well as very constructive suggestions to find a solution to this problem. So I don't think we can sort of find a very quick solution to any of this, but we can progress. Yes, Gratian, you have something to say.
Yeah, well, Chula, you can share my presentation, and if others have any comments, they can send me, right? And if they want to add certain details, well, I'm still working on this and on other things as well. So if there are any comments, any inputs, any criticisms, any contradictions, let me know, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's what I'm saying. So we welcome all the feedback for good or bad or whatever, because that's the way we can improve. So we have to be very constructive and then take it forward from there. And thank you, everybody. And then we will take this matter again at some point because we got some other things going on in parallel, and then we'll meet again soon. And next Sunday is going to be a similar one. We'll see how it comes. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll advertise what it's going to be. Nilmani, thank you as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Chula.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. See you.